Hello and welcome to Stocks Down Under. My name is Stuart Roberts and I'm one of the co-founders of our service. And joining me today from Melbourne on the morning of Friday, the 9th of June, 2023, is an old friend of our firm, Mr. David Williams of Kidder Williams. David, good morning.
And good morning to you, Stuart.
We've had you on this program before talking about one of the companies that you're involved in called RMA Group. That's not the purpose for today's meeting. Today, we're going to talk about a company you've chaired since early 2014, Polynovo, ASX PNV. David, well done to you and your team on your stewardship of this company at board level. It was a science experiment back in 2014. It's now a billion-dollar company growing sales quite strongly. That's happened under your leadership as chairman. Well done.
Well, thank you. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, though, as usual, so I can't take too much of the accolades.
Right. Let's talk about the origins of this company. The product originated from some CSIRO developed technology that developed into a product called NovoSorb, new generation skin substitute, probably the best scaffold one of the best scaffolds that medicine has discovered. Where surgeons can use it. Originally, the original approved application was in burns, in serious burns. 2022, big step up with NovoSorb MTX to broaden the applications in all sorts of other indications beyond burns, and now sales are up and running. What's been the biggest step forward, in your opinion, over that journey from NovoSorb being approved originally and where we are today?
Well, I think the efficacy and ease of use of the product is the biggest driver of it. I mean, it clearly works. Right. So it's really just been about putting more people on the ground in the US in particular, Australia, New Zealand, and now starting to expand that geographically. But I don't know exactly today, Stuart, how many people we've got selling in the US, but let's say it's 60. And we've got staff there of 80 odd, supporting those people and so forth. But that could easily be 150. And so there's big parts of America we haven't touched yet. We're in most of the major burn centres, but there's still, let's say there's 130 of them, we're probably in 105. So there's still a bit to go there. But what's really happened, Stuart, is because the product is so easy to use and surgeons have jumped onto it wherever they see tissue loss. Even though we might not have ever thought we'd be in some of these things, jumped on it. We're sort of playing catch up in a way with the surgeon. So we started with a product that was working. We thought it would change the world in many ways, and it has. But what we didn't anticipate, I think, was how big that market might be for all sorts of tissue loss. And as I said, we're catching up with the surgeons because they're using it for oncology burns, they're using it for venous leg ulcers, they're using it for necrotizing fasciitis, they're using it for limb salvage, anywhere where there's tissue loss, and it's very, very exciting, and it's a very easy sell in a way. I don't say this lightly, but if a financial institution or investor comes to us and they say, look, where can we do some DD? I say, well, here's some. You can go and do it yourself, but if you want me to give you some surgeons, here's one at Mayo, here's one at Harvard, here's one at UCLA. Go talk to them. And one of the things they get told when they talk is the surgeon will say, look, I'm using it all the time. I don't use the alternative anymore. But in addition to that, this is changing the way in which surgery is done. And that's about as much as any financial institution needs to hear before they go away and go, oh, I might buy a few of this, But there's still large parts of those hospitals. So when I send somebody into a hospital, he might be talking, 2 years ago was only talking, let's say, the burn surgeon. Now he's talking to all sorts of surgeons and going from floor to floor, And when you go down the hospital, a lot of the surgeons haven't heard of it yet because they're in orthopedics or they're in heart or either cancer or whatever it happens to be. I'm probably talking too much still, but I'll just give you one anecdote. I was talking to a very famous surgeon in New Zealand last week who's at Auckland Hospital, and he's probably the biggest user of Polynovo BTM in the world, believe it or not, in Auckland.
Okay.
That's because Auckland's the centre of the universe for burns in
anyone who gets burned, unfortunately, in New Zealand and the Greater Pacific will end up in this particular institution in Auckland.
Correct. And
Right.
so, and I said to him, look, what else are you using it for? Because I'm always fascinated to how surgeons are adapting the use. He said, look, I was walking along the corridor yesterday, and one of my colleagues was just preparing to amputate a leg below the knee. The patient had, significant diabetes, and below the knee had a venous leg ulcer, a big gash wound, and couldn't be repaired. And
That's treatable now. Just put BTM on it, and you can probably save the leg, right?
so the guy's about to take the leg off. And normally when there's this sort of wound, or sometimes when there's this sort of wound, not for diabetics, but they'll do a flap. So they might even just cut a big piece of, flesh and skin out of your arm, put it in the wound, and away you go. But because you've got a diabetic patient, that is not vascularized, so they don't do it. And he thought he had no alternative but to whip the leg off because he just couldn't solve the leg problem, the ulcer problem. So this guy, the surgeon, says to him, why would you do that? Just put BTM on it. He goes, well, what's that? So he grabs a piece of BTM, he cuts it out to the size of the wound, he puts it in the hole, he staples it in, and he goes, there it is. And the guy goes, what, that's all there is to it? It's got to be more complicated than that. No, that's it. Bandage it up, come back in a month, and do a dressing change, and it'll all be done. So
this patient saved their leg, and you've got another loyal customer in New Zealand for BTM.
100%. And
right.
there's a video of this for your readers that are interested. If you go onto our site, there's a dozen videos of surgeons, major surgeons around the world, sitting beside their patient and showing you what they've done and showing the flexibility of and the outcome of it and so forth. And one of them on there, if they go look, is a guy that fell off a train, and the train ran over his foot, and it cut off his foot. Sort of didn't take the whole ankle off, but basically all the foot was gone and the stump of the ankle. Well, they couldn't seem to solve it. And they were about preparing again, the same sort of story, preparing to take his leg off below the knee. And again, one of our surgeons in the hospital, just forget which it was, in Carolina or something like that, he said, why do you do that? Why don't you just clean up the stump and put the BTM on it, which they did. And here in the video, you'll see the guys, and within months, he's just riding a bike, he's lost most of his foot, but that's easy to sort of replace, in terms of, day-to-day. So anyway, look, I've rambled on a bit. I'm just saying that it's hard to keep up.
The moral of the story is more and more indications keep cropping up for BTM. And if people look at the recent presentation at the Macquarie conference in May, you can see that pipeline is just deepening and deepening.
Yes.
Company just had its first $7 million month. And the curve of sales is only going in one direction. Yeah. But what's interesting to me is the company raised about $52 million in a placement share purchase plan at $1.90 last year. And the aim of the game was then to conquer the rest of the world outside the all-important US market. So this thing is going truly global now.
Oh, look, everybody knows we went into Canada in December on the back of the Canadian Burns Association meeting. We went into Hong Kong in December, and we went into India in December. So here we are sitting 5 months later. Now, what happened in Canada is the sales are going through the roof. So the sales, I think, for May, this $7 million month we just talked about now, I think the sales for May in Canada year to date were something like 1.5 million already.
Right.
The sales we haven't told the market what the sales were in Hong Kong because I didn't think it was all that important at the time. But we went in December. We sent our chief saleswoman up there from here. She just went up for a week. She sold into there's 4 major hospitals in Hong Kong. She sold into one of them. Then she went back a couple of weeks later and she sold into the second one. And now we've got the third hospital out of the 4 trialing it as well. And so we start slowly, you get convinced one surgeon and they start using it. And next thing, there's a sort of I wouldn't call it an avalanche, but I said to her a couple of days ago, I said, look, how are those sales going in Hong Kong? She says, going great. She said, look, we've booked sales, I think, in May for over $100,000. And there's another $40,000 or $50,000 that have been ordered, but we haven't delivered yet. So I didn't bring the revenue. But let's just say roughly $150,000 a month. That's $1 million plus business in Hong Kong that we've built since December last year.
Right.
And the product is a very, very high margin, so it pays for itself very quickly. Now, India is the third one. And that's been a bit slow, only because we hired 20. We don't have anybody in Hong Kong, by the way. We're looking to put somebody on very soon.
So if you're a decent salesperson for pharmaceutical product or medical devices, and you want to work in Hong Kong, get your resume to David Williams, right?
Correct. If you're already talking to surgeons, then you know what you've got to do.
Right.
And but in India we hired 20 people. And about 3 weeks ago, we pulled them all into, I think, New Delhi, and we trained them all together. And then we released them back out 2 weeks ago into the market. So we gave each of them a territory in India. So as I said, I think we got 18 salespeople and then 2 in the head office. Well, within a week, we had sales into 2 different hospitals. And today, and I think I said it in the release we had the other day, we've sold into now 15 different hospitals, okay, in the space of a couple of weeks. Now, India's a different market because we've decided to go in at a slightly lower price than what we charge in the West, and so we're feeling our way a little bit, in terms of its affordability and so forth. But I asked you to sort of think about this, that the issue of burns, and we're no longer a burns company, but let's just take burns. The issue of burns in the West is becoming less and less of an issue.
Yeah, less people get burned every year. The world's a safer place, at least in the Western world.
Correct. But also, when you think about it, most of the burns victims are men, and a lot of them are industrial accidents, and quite a number of them are people trying to top themselves, but it's essentially a men-centric thing, and the numbers are going down. When you go to parts of Africa, Indonesia, India, rural China, the number of burns is 10 to 20 times per head of population.
Often it's children as well in that environment too.
And women, because
right.
A lot of those people are living in huts where they've got fires. So your sari catches fire, your kid falls in it. And so there's an unbelievable need in the burns side of the business in those countries. So getting that right is going to be fantastic. And because we've got such a high margin in our product, we can afford, there's a lot of fat in the system. So we can afford to, make it acceptable to the market. And we've already got immediate traction, as I said, in India and Hong Kong. So you've got to say, wow, where can this end,
So for those who are relatively new to the story, this is turning into a real company now. We're talking in excess of 50 million a year in revenue.
Oh, yeah.
With very high gross margins. So
yeah.
And as we've talked about a lot in this call, the growth curve is fairly strong. What do you hope to have achieved? Let's say we're having this conversation at the end of FY24. What would be an ideal point to have reached to?
Well, I mean, we did 40 million in sales last year. We just announced that we had our first $7 million month.
Right.
That's quite conservative in a way, because it was actually about 7.2, and then we've got other revenue that comes from barter and so forth. So it's closer to 8.
Right.
So the consensus amongst the analysts is that for this year, FY23, we'll do 60 million turnover, give or take.
Right.
And my best guess is that I've got no reason to criticise that. But at a $7 or $8 million turnover, we've got a run rate of 80 or 90 million.
Right.
So you say, well, it keeps going up. It's still lumpy. So we did 7.2 or something this month. June might be 6. It might be 8. We don't know just yet. And but the trajectory is in one direction, even though it's still a bit lumpy.
Right.
But so I think even just on the basis of what you're seeing now, the consensus amongst the analysts is that the turnover this year for 24, we're about to start, will be $100 million.
Okay.
But we just don't know at the moment.
You got some new leadership. September of last year, Swami Rayoti joined you from a few decades working in various Johnson & Johnson businesses over time. How'd you come to pick him, working out of Jacksonville, Florida, to build this company?
Well, we had an acting CEO who was Max Johnson, and coincidentally same name, but he had been managing director of Johnson & Johnson in Australia, decided to retire and take board positions. And so when we were looking for a CEO, he said, look, he started talking to me about Swami about a board position. He said, look, this guy's retired. He could be good on the board. He's in the US. And so as we're thinking about that, he then suggested, why don't you think about him for the CEO's role? So that's really how it came about. He would otherwise have been here full time. I mean, that's what we intended. But as we got to the sort of the vinegar stroke, as it were, he revealed that he's going for his green card, and that he had 18 months to go on that, and that in order to get a green card, you're only allowed to be out of the US for no more than 160, 170 days a year.
Right.
So we split his time between the US, well, and other jurisdictions, by the way, and here. So he's in America at the moment doing some work with our team in California, and then he'll be here Sunday morning. So, and expecting to be here for a while yet.
So, $1 billion company on ASX, grown to the point where it's fair to say that the plane has well and truly left the tarmac in terms of this journey. Now, you must be concerned that at some point a major pharma company wants to get hold of this thing to get hold of what will be the NovoSorb franchise. What happens at that point?
Well, Stuart, we're both in the market, and I'm an investment banker. You can't stop people doing that. I mean, What I would say to you, though, is that if you look at this wound care and skincare segment in the US, there's a lot of people that are not profitable.
Right.
We have a synthetic, so the cost of production is minuscule. But if you've got a biologic and you have to go to an abattoir and source a piece of pig gut, for example, or sheep gut, and then clean it and cut it and freeze dry it and and sanitize it and so forth and get it to a hospital, your cost base is huge. And so there are a lot of people who are just not making any money. And so it's easy to say, well, gee, somebody's going to find you attractive. Well, even Integra, who we would think was probably our biggest competitor in the US, they just had a product recall, by the way, last week.
Right.
A product recall of 5 years product. I'm not sure how many hospitals actually hold 5 years product, but I think their market cap's circa 6 billion, let's say, but only a part of it's wound care. So even for them, if they were to look at us now, and we're going like topsy, as you can see, you got to be looking at least paying $2-3 billion for it. So even for somebody as big as Integra, a $2 or $3 billion purchase is a big bite, number one. And number two, it cannibalizes your existing product because everybody else is in organics. And so imagine if you've got a pig gut and a Polynovo product, you go to see the surgeon, you go, well, which one are you going to promote? It's like surgeon goes, well, which one do you prefer? And so it's like, which of your children do you like? And so I don't think they're going to come easily. But you're quite right. The product is reshaping surgery, and somebody will eventually come. But it probably won't be one of the existing players. It probably will be somebody like, say, a Johnson & Johnson, somebody who's not in the space, but who wants to have a new silo that's, a very valuable silo. So I think that's where the interest will come from. But look, in the meantime, we just got to grow as quickly as we can, because otherwise we'll be leaving too much, value on the table. So if you imagine, for example, let's just take J&J. They've got a business that has 300 salespeople around the world, about 180 in America, 120 elsewhere, that are just selling into the breast surgeon market. Now, we haven't started selling our product into the breast surgeon market yet.
But that's coming, right? And it's going to be a huge opportunity when you get there.
Correct. But what I'm saying is that somebody who says, well, we've got 300 salesmen going to every surgeon on the planet already, why don't we add another product into it? There's some enormous synergies that come from people who have got existing distribution channels, which is what we're trying to build at the moment. But even in things like podiatry, imagine, diabetic foot ulcers. There's people that have got 100 people on the road in the US just selling to podiatrists. So, and we're selling lots of this product now for diabetic foot ulcers and venous leg ulcers and so forth. So there's a lot of people who would have, quite a bit of synergistic input into this because they deliver an existing delivery mechanism and channel.
Right. David Williams, well done to you and your team and Swami over in the US. This is turning out to be a great story. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, and good luck with your new business as well.
Growing strongly too. Thank you so much.